Hello Foxies, for the past couple of months, I've been asked to make a oil painting guide for beginners, so here it is. I don't really like intros, but I'm an artist just trying to help other artists do what they love best. So starting off, I like to sort of color wash my canvases with burnt umber and Gamsol, just with a paintbrush, and then later on scrubbing it all out with a tissue like this. It does really help painting on a sort of toned canvas, whatever color you like. I do really recommend the neutral browns. It just helps the colors show better. After that, I'll take the burnt umber with less Gamsol and I will sketch it out just simply with basic shapes, trying to not get too detailed. Before this, I do like to prime my canvases with gesso. And the palette I use is this glass palette, which I didn't necessarily buy. I kind of found it in like my kitchen area, and I do recommend glass palettes for oil paintings because it doesn't dry as fast as if you would use wood or plastic on it. And I really love a palette knife, so I do recommend getting one of these. I've always used to mix my paint color with my brushes, and that is really bad for your brushes, so do get a palette knife. For paintbrushes, I like to use paintbrushes that are meant for oil painting because when it does come to painting with oils, the brushes are probably the most important. I have two of these. One of them is the Artify little paintbrush set with all the little tiny brush sizes. This is really good for if you want detail and if you're doing like little paintings like I am today. This second brush set is one that has the more bigger paintbrushes, I would say, and the more variety of types and sizes. I forgot the name of this set, but I will write it down in the bio down below, so please do check it out. All the materials I used today will also be linked down below. I've spent way too much money on art products and products that I think would work with my oil paints, and for now these are the only ones that stand a chance without hurting my wallet too much. Now that we're good with that, my canvas that I'm using is actually not a very good canvas. It was purchased through Amazon, so not very good, but I did gesso it a couple times, which really does help it regain its quality. This painting stand is from Median, if you're wondering, also will be linked down below. And now for my oil painting color palette. The first and the most important is obviously my burnt umber. Another brown I like to use is burnt sienna, just to help out with the landscapes. I really do like white, titanium white to be specific, and I like to get the big bottle because I do run out of it pretty quickly. For the blues, I like to use ultranainium blue. I have no idea how to say it. And I like to use a turquoise, and if you don't have turquoise, you can always use cobalt teal, which I do have as well. For the yellows, I like to use cadmium yellow light, but I do also like to use yellow ochre. For the reds, I like to use cadmium red light. I also like to use magenta, but I did lose it. Now for the painting stages, I do like to work from the back to the front, and I like to start with painting the darkest areas, which I've probably heard a bunch of artists say because it is very correct. To be really honest, painting does take practice, and the only way you are going to get better is by doing many little paintings instead of a really big painting once a year. A thing to note is you have to know what style you are interested in. In my case, I'm interested in painting landscapes in a loose style but has a little bit of detail. And for that, I like to research and look at other artists who do the same sort of work and find the techniques that they do. If you're looking for more detailed painting style, then you should also go and check out the artists that do detailed paintings, and so on and so forth. But a couple of tips that I like to paint and make the painting have some depth is the things that are at the farthest from your eye. They should be a little bit misty almost. Like add brown and white. I like to add brown, a little bit of brown and white to it so that it has a sort of like almost dull look, because once you get to the front, that's when you should use the more opaque colors without really dulling it and making it look very gloomy. That way the people that look at your painting can notice what you really want to be the center of attention. I used to paint with acrylics back in the days, and compared to acrylics, oil paint is a very slow drying medium, which does help you be able to mix and blend colors. And you can also choose to paint in layers, which means you would wait for your paint to dry and then go on top of it, or you can paint a la prima like I am today. It just means to paint while the paint is still pretty wet, basically, and just finishing the painting off that way. Another tip I would like to give is to try and experiment with different brushes. In this case, I'm using the fan brush to paint the water, which does give a really good effect. I feel like if I did have one paintbrush to use for a painting, I'm pretty sure one of them would most likely be a fan brush. I used to paint with only one brush, which ended up making my painting feel like it lost a bunch of texture and sort of emotion. So do experiment with different types of brushes. It would greatly affect your paintings and make them look so much better. Another tip I have learned very recently is if you are painting trees or plants that are in the very back and are very close to the sky, do mix in the sky colors with it so that it could have a almost seamless blend to it, and it would make the people who see your paintings figure out that the trees are very far away, almost close to the sky. Now, when it comes to painting the rocks, and in this case, it's the closest thing that we see, I do like going in with the darks, and the color I use for that is the blue and burnt umber. This is the closest way to getting a sort of black, and because I don't really often like using black unless I'm painting with a Zorn palette, this is the closest to get to the darkest color. After I added the mid-tone, which means I included a little bit of white and yellow to make this really pretty brown color, and after I put that all in, then I did go with even lighter color. This is a very simple but effective approach. Then I added a sort of highlight, not too bright, with a bit of the brown and yellow and white. Now for the water, I just went ahead and added the sort of darker areas, which is the shadow from the little mountain. Here's a little video of how I sort of mixed the dark color using my palette knife, and once again the ultramarine blue and the burnt umber. I saved the darkest colors for the darkest areas of the painting and the focal point, which is this tree, and in this instance the tree trunk that I'm painting with this beautiful brown, dark brown, and a little bit of sort of gray parts. You see how I'm constantly going back and adding paint. I don't want my branch to be super tinted with white. Like I said, I am painting basically wet on wet, and I have to do this in order for the brown not to turn really, really white. Now, when I add the greens to this tree, it's basically the same concept as the rocks. I go from the darkest to lights, and in this case the dark green, and then you'll see that I go into a sort of mid-tone green, and then finally a detailed lighter green. I'm not really an orderly painter, so when I do have a color like green and I need it for another part of the area, I would go and paint that, which in this case I was painting the tree, and then the bush needed some green, so I went there first, and then I will go back again to the tree and add more details. For this, I would like to use a very small brush to add the smaller details, since a bigger brush would be a bit harder to do with this. Now for the highlights of the tree, once again, I don't really like using pure white most of the time, so I would just have white and add a little bit of my yellow inside of it to make this really pretty yellow color that I like to put in most of my paintings. It depends on your style, but there are some people who like to use a almost really bright lavender to use as their highlights, and that is really pretty, but in my case I like to use a yellow as my highlight. Because I'm going for a loose abstract sort of painting, I will just take that yellow and go around and do many sort of shapes in between the rocks and patterns. Now back to the water, I do like to jump around quite a bit in my paintings. I'm going to add a sort of cobalt teal and blue to give life to my water, because it does feel a little bit dull to me, and doing this does really help bring out the sort of atmosphere. As you see, I'm painting very lightly, not too harsh. You do this when you're trying to really blend in soft edges, and having that not hard hand on your paintbrush does really help. Now for my favorite part, I like to get a little tiny brush, and here I use some white but still a little bit colored with some of the blue, and just make the waves, the foam, just to add a bit more detail, not too much. Here I'm going to add a bit of white in this sort of horizon line so that you guys can see where it starts, and blending it in with my finger. I don't really recommend to do this with oil paint, but I do anyways, so hopefully I don't really injure myself because of this. Talking about caution, when painting with oil paints, you must always have a window open or fan, some sort of motion going that won't keep the oil paint stuck. Some people wear gloves and masks too to help the oil paint not get in their lungs, but usually these toxins come from the medium you're using, like the Gamsol, Gamvar, that sort of stuff, so do check it before you take it. Now here is my finished quick oil painting landscape. Now for how to clean your paintbrush and paint palette. Because I am using the glass palette, I like to use this scraper that you could probably find at Home Depot or any sort of cleaning oven surface area, and I like to just scrape it off. Whether it's dry or wet, you can do this, and it's very satisfying. For cleaning your brushes, a lot of people do very complicated things. I just use coconut oil. The only way to clean oil is with oil, and my favorite is to use this coconut oil. Just basically rub the oil on the brush and then kind of sort of scrub it out with the tissue very lightly, or however you want to do it. But I have seen that other people use like specific soaps or like really expensive materials to clean their brushes. This is the best way for me, and it does keep your bristles very soft and keeps it alive for a longer time. I do really recommend, and not a lot of people know this, but you should try it. Now for what to do after it dries. Oil paint usually dries into a different sort of color. Like let's say you painted it very wet, and then after it dries it turns very dull. This is when you use Gamvar gloss and the Gamvar varnish brush to basically take it and gloss it out and bring back the color. I recommend using this brush and not any other brush. This is an expensive brush, almost $45, but it does really help and you won't have to waste your other brushes. This is the end of the video. Thank you guys for watching. I hope any of my tips here helped you out, and if you still have some questions, please do comment them down below. I feel like I did miss a couple of things I might remember later on, so do comment them down below. Please make sure to check my description for other materials. Goodbye!